Hello horror hounds and welcome to my horror house. I would like to talk this time round about Burnt Offerings from 1976. A fairly standard sort of supernatural or haunted house attacking a family movie that is notable in my opinion for a couple of things. Firstly, it's part of a sort of loose cycle of movies from very loosely around this time in America, which sort of deconstructs or undermines the notion of the nuclear family or the family unit, which makes it kissing cousins with films like The Hills Have Eyes and The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Poltergeist, which came after it, and certainly the film which it sits most closely with is something like the Amityville Horror. All of them either have distorted or dark versions of the poster of the American nuclear family, or have an example of that family unit now under attack. So it is with Burnt Offerings, which is, as I say, a fairly standard tale about a family who answer an ad to rent out a property, and all they have to do whilst they look after the upkeep of the property is also look after an aging relative who lives in the attic room, Mrs. Allardyce. And when they arrive, you know, the place is much larger and grander than they expected, and the siblings who are interviewing them as potential candidates to live and work there are as quirky and strange, giving off all those red flags as you would imagine. And also the rent that's being asked, which they think is per month that they can't afford, is actually for the entire period of time they're there. So the asking price of staying in this place is ridiculously low. Wah, wah, wah. You know, all the typical warning signs should be going off. The other thing that makes it stand out for me is the insane cast that this film has. Burgess Meredith, in all too brief an appearance, is one of the siblings who is arranging to rent out the place, and he is as sensational as you would want him to be. If you want more of him in this kind of role, the sort of strange, quirky neighbour who really signposts that something fucked up is happening, you can check him out in Michael Winner's The Sentinel. The matriarch of the family is Karen Black. The father is Oliver Reed, who always gives good value. And his aunt is played by the indomitable Bette Davis, who has entered this latter portion of her career where she's doing genre stuff like Disney's The Watcher in the Woods, and clearly doesn't give a flying fuck and just goes at everything with absolute gusto, and I love her for it. Also of note behind the camera, it's directed by Dan Curtis, he of Dark Shadows and Trilogy of Terror, The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler. So even though the film is fairly standard and it is based off a novel by Roberto Marasco, it has enough about it in front of and behind the camera to at least make it a curiosity to watch. And there is enough in there for me to recommend it. Yes, the pacing is a little off, and sometimes it gets a little bit ho-hum. There doesn't seem to be an organic building towards something like you get with, let's say, The Shining, which this does feel like a precursor to The Shining. The book and the movie came out before Stephen King's The Shining and Kubrick's The Shining. This seems like a strange kissing cousin of The Shining, and maybe even a hint of what could have been. But whereas the narrative of The Shining is pretty focused, and we're fairly clear on who the Overlook Hotel is affecting and how they are being affected, Burnt Offerings is a bit of a mishmash. There's a lot of stuff that happens, a lot of haunted house or supernatural stuff that happens, but it's fairly slapdash and unfocused. Yes, Karen Black's mum, Scene, who is the one who is responsible for looking after the mysterious Mrs. Allardyce up in the attic, seems to be obsessed with the history of the house and seems to be falling in love with it in a similar way that Jack Torrance later will fall in love with the Overlook Hotel. Yes, Oliver Reed has moments where his character is sort of seems to be overtaken by whatever force is active in this property, and is sort of forced to or made to want to do physical harm to his own son in a massive precursor to The Shining and Jack Torrance with little Danny. But then all of these things sort of happen, and you're never quite sure who's going to be the antagonist and who's going to be the protagonist, who's going to get taken over, because whilst this sort of instance of violence is one of the most shocking bits of the movie, and acted really quite nastily by Oliver Reed. It's quite a grim moment. It just takes place in the swimming pool where ostensibly the dad is trying to teach his son how to swim, and then it turns into bullying, and then it turns into something a lot nastier. It does make you absolutely wonder what Oliver Reed would have done as Jack Torrance in a different version of that movie. I think he would have been absolutely superb for the role, because Oliver Reed is absolutely adept. Not least because of his own personal demons of playing someone's at one moment sort of soulfully empathetic and another sort of rage-filled and anger-fueled. But his character, even after this sort of outburst of violence, is the one that's most racked with guilt about it, and the one who is most attuned to there being something strange and wrong going on in the house. So you're never quite sure which shoe is going to drop and where until the very end, which is another highlight of the film, which I won't spoil for you, but we do build to a very definite conclusion, which does set this story apart from its kith and kin, like the Amityville Horror. For the moments of downtime and poor pacing, it's worth it to get to what I consider to be an extremely effective ending. And splattered throughout an original concept from the director, Dan Curtis, taken, I understand, from reading up on it, from an instance in his own past when he attended his mother's funeral. He introduces a character that is not present in the original book at all, or the original script, of this smiling chauffeur who is so sort of creepy and uncanny that I can absolutely guarantee if you'd seen Burnt Offerings at an impressionable age, then I could wholly believe that the smiling chauffeur would be one of these horror characters that stays with you for the rest of your life, a little bit like the Reverend at the door in Poltergeist 2. So whilst it's not perfect, whilst it's a little bit scrappy, to watch a sort of haunted house movie with this kind of cast and with enough moments that work to weigh against the moments that don't work, I would say that this is worth a Sunday afternoon of your time. And as I say, if you watched it in your formative years, I can absolutely understand why this would be one of your sort of favourite gems, one of your gateway movies into horror, which snagged you.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.